We hit the last week of the regular season as week 9 is finally here. We have a big weekend ahead of us as we have games coming to an end. We have some games that can definitely impact the playoff picture potentially. And then on top of that, we have our big playoff show coming up this Saturday at 6:30 p.m. where I'll be joined live with View from the West, Greg Armstrong, Spotlight on IHSA's Joe Murdian, and former Orangeville head coach Jay Doyle as we break down all of the teams from 8-man, Class 1A, 2A, and 3A, and bring you a look into what the playoff picture is going to look like. We're going to talk teams to watch, players to watch, along with many other little nuggets that are come up along the way, and then we'll have the live bracket release as well. IHSA will begin to release at 8 o'clock, followed by Class 1A at 8:06, Class 2A at 8:12, Class 3A at 8:18, or in those approximate time frames depending on the release from IHSA. Tune into our YouTube channel. All you have to do is go to YouTube, search NUIC football. We'll get the link posted out as soon as we go live. They'll be on our Facebook page along with our X handle. That way you guys can tune in and take a look. We'll have the chat box open for live interaction so you guys can put out the questions that you have. All questions will get answered, guaranteed. So tune in for a great night of football, not just in Northwest Illinois, but around the state as we collaborate and get a lot of information from friends throughout the area of the state to bring the best information forward for small school football on Saturday night for our playoff show. In the meantime, we're going to take a look at a very quick recap of Week 8. We're going to look ahead at a pretty quick synopsis of what the Week 9 matchups look like, and then we're going to go and take a look at what that potential playoff outlook does actually look like ahead of these Week 9 games. So stay with us here as we bring that up next.
Need a fresh look for your home? Neff Paints, based in Warren, Illinois, is the local expert in interior and exterior painting, staining, and power washing. Serving Galena, Dubuque, Lake Carroll, Apple Canyon Lake, Lena, and beyond, Neff Paints uses premium products for lasting quality. Contact Skylar at 815-541-7338 for a free estimate and let your home shine inside and out.
Okay, taking a look at a recap of Week 8. I'm just going to go through the scores real fast of what happened in the NUIC and across 8-man, and then we'll move into the next topic of the subject. In the NUIC, Stockton beat Dakota 52-20. The 20 points that Dakota put up is the most that they put up on the year. While Stockton stayed hot, they picked up their 5th win of the year to make themselves playoff eligible heading into Week 9. Du-Pec gets the 54-26 win over Forreston. They'll have a big matchup with Seneca coming up here in Week 9 as well. Fulton picks up a playoff point for the teams from the NUIC that are making the playoffs as they beat Knoxville 61-40. Lena Winslow guarantees at least a share of the conference title with a 22-10 win over Galena. It's the 3rd conference title for Lena Winslow in a row as they continue to look to dominate. And EPC clinched their spot in the playoffs, picking up their 6th win as they fought out an 18-14 win over Morrison. In IHSA, some games along the way, most notably the games among the teams that we're looking at viewing in the playoffs. Polo beat West Carroll 52-6. Orangeville picked up their 4th win over AFC 52-20. That makes their Week 9 matchup with Polo, while daunting as it may be, a must-win game for the Broncos in order to make the playoffs. Milledgeville beat River Ridge 80-36. Amboy beat West Central 50-8. Ridgewood comes away with the win over Flanagan Cornell Woodland 42-14. Metro East Lutheran picked up their 4th win, a 74-28 win over Blue Ridge. and then rolled that right into their 5th win to qualify for the playoffs, most likely, as they have a forfeit win over Schlarman Academy this week. St. Thomas More eked out a 20-18 win over South Fork. Both teams will be in the playoffs. Martinsville took down Milford Cisna Park 50-30 in a big game of state-ranked opponents there. Pawnee remained undefeated with a 44-6 win over Unity Christian. A Week 9 win for Pawnee will solidify that number 1 overall seed for the Indians. And St. Anne beat Oblong 51-8 as they continue to pick up the wins to secure playoff seeding as they get into the playoffs for the first time as a program. That's a view of what happened in Week 8. We're going to move ahead to our Week 9 matchups coming up next. We are going to start in IHSA action. The first game we are talking about is Amboy as the Clippers play host to Bushnell Prairie City. Amboy enters this game with a 7-1 record, while BPC enters at 3-5. This is a rematch of the Week 4 game that saw Amboy come away with a 58-22 win. It provided that all games go as expected. A win for the Clippers here in this matchup will guarantee them the number 4 seed in the playoffs. If one of those teams above them falters, there is a possibility that Amboy can move up their seeding, but those chances are pretty slim looking at the competition that they face in Week 9. Look for Amboy to win this one big. Christian Life hits the road as they play River Ridge. The Wildcats enter this game at 2-6, while Christian Life enters this game at 1-7. It really hasn't been a great season, but River Ridge has definitely grown as the season has gone on. We've seen some great play out of a lot of different players. Damon Dittmer has definitely been the key guy for the Wildcats as he continues to climb the all-time IHSA list for passing yards. Already has cleared 2,000 yards in his career. But there's a lot of things for River Ridge to look up to. This one can be one of those games that they can go out and win to put a stamp on the 2024 season and finish on a positive side, especially considering the youth that River Ridge has in their program. Big things to come for the Wildcats moving forward. I feel they get the win in this one to get themselves to 3-6 and are able to help hopefully carry some of that momentum over into next season. Milledgeville enters Week 9 with a 7-1 record as they travel to Kirkland to play Hiawatha, who enters at 2-6. Milledgeville should have no issues in this game as they look to secure at least the 6th seed with the win. Similar to what we discussed earlier with Amboy, if some other teams above Milledgeville falter, which they're not favored to, Milledgeville could see themselves move up. But right now, projections show Milledgeville be the 6th seed when the playoffs open up come Saturday night with the playoff show. The biggest game in our area in 8-man is going to be Polo at Orangeville. The Marcos are 8-0 and Orangeville's 4-4. And while I preface it as a big game, really it's a big game for Orangeville. The only way Orangeville can make the playoffs is with a win over Polo. Right now, Metro East Lutheran has already picked up their 5th win via a forfeit over Schlarman Academy. Therefore, they are technically in the playoff seat at this moment. Alden Hebron holds the tiebreaker over Orangeville because Alden Hebron and Orangeville played back in Week 1 with the Giants winning that game. If the Giants and Broncos were both to lose this week to finish the regular season at 4-5, Alden Hebron would secure that playoff spot in the 16 seed due to that tiebreaker of the head-to-head win. If the Broncos are to beat Polo, they will knock Metro East Lutheran out of the playoffs because the Broncos do hold more playoff points. There's a lot to play out in this game. Polo definitely enters as a large favorite, but anything can happen when people want stuff to get in their control. With that said, Polo is my pick to win. I would expect to see a big fight out of Orangeville in this game, but it's going to take a lot of effort and a full 48 minutes for the Broncos to do that and knock off the perennial power Polo Marcos. West Carroll at South Beloit is another big game in IHSA action. Both teams enter this game at 6-2. This game definitely has a lot of intrigue in it, as the winner is going to get the higher seed and a first round home playoff game, while the loser is going to get a lesser seed and will have to go on the road for that first round game. There's definitely a lot to play for in this game, as these two teams on paper look to be evenly matched ahead of this game. We'll see which way the Thunder and the Sobos go. Right now, the early favorite is on West Carroll, and they are my projected pick to win.
This portion of our broadcast is brought to you by Diedrich Epoxy Flooring. Serving northern Illinois and southern Wisconsin, Diedrich Epoxy is the source for all of your epoxy needs. Give Diedrich Epoxy Flooring a call today at 815-239-1158 for your free estimate.
Moving into NUIC action, Dakota travels to Lanark to play EPC. Dakota enters this game at 0-8, while EPC enters at 6-2. The Wildcats locked up their playoff bid last week in a come-from-behind win over Morrison. Dakota, on the other hand, scored the most points they have all season against Stockton. One team has a playoff to get ready for, while the other team is playing their last game of the regular season. For EPC, they have a lot to look forward to as they look to secure a win and the 9th seed most likely, which means that they will have to go on the road. Every projection model I've looked at myself, along with others, has shown that EPC is going to match up most likely, highly reliable possibility with Rockridge, a team that is familiar to playing in the area as they play in the Three Rivers Athletic Conference. But EPC has to get the job done first, and provided they take care of business as expected, they are the heavy favorite in this matchup. They also look to be one of the favorites in the Class 2A field, as we're looking at that 2A North bracket really opening up for anybody's taking, with the current way that seeding shifted teams and bumped Wilmington, the defending Class 2A state champs, into the Class 3A field at this moment. There's a little bit of chance for that to break loose. The likelihood of that happening is going to be far and few between, as I believe, if I remember correctly, there's only 3 potential games that could affect that. And all 3 of those games are favored to the teams that are expected to win those games and secure their spots in the playoff field. Time will tell. Big game for EPC here, though, as they can look to secure that 9 seed. 9 seed's not always a bad place to be sitting, especially come playoff time. You get that first road game out of the way, you could find yourself sitting at home for a long time leading up to the semifinals if you can make that run. Forreston travels to Lena Winslow as the Panthers enter at 8-0, while Forreston enters this game at 2-6. The game, typically dubbed the rivalry, has a different look to it this year, as Forreston will not be in the playoff field for the first time since 2009. Lena Winslow is looking to capture their 3rd consecutive outright conference title with a win and pick up their 27th consecutive regular season win. While Forreston has not been up to the level that we had expected them to be at, or their goals had expected them to be at, we don't expect Forreston to be down for very long. They have done a great job at the lower levels to put together a very hard-fought regular season where going into Week 8's games, they were sitting undefeated at 7-0. So it'll be interesting to see how Forreston can turn the corner going into 2025. On the other side of this aisle are the Panthers of Lena Winslow, one of the heavy favorites to get back to normal in the Class 1A field. Granted, nothing comes easy. These Panthers have shown that. Games that they have been predicted to blow out have been close. Games that have been predicted to be closer losses, they've blown out. It's kind of been a Jekyll and Hyde, but somewhere in the realm, the Panthers continue to get it done, and you can only put that on the pedigree of a championship-level program. However, the pressure might be building on the Panthers to continue to live up to past success. They have to block out that noise and just focus on the task at hand, and they have a great coaching staff to help guide them in that way. Expect Lena Winslow to run away with this one and finish the regular season undefeated for the third consecutive year. Morrison hits the road to Fulton as both teams enter this game at 3-5. It's the first time that the Wooden Shoe Bowl game is played in the NUIC. Both teams entered the 2024 season as favorites to make the playoffs. To each of their demise, neither will be playing in the postseason. But one team can walk away with the wooden shoe as this deep rivalry gets renewed here in Week 9. The owner of the wooden shoe currently belongs to Fulton, as they were the team to last win the wooden shoe in the regular season when these two teams met when they were both members of the Three Rivers Athletic Conference. Now, looking ahead at this game, Morrison appears to be the early favorite in this game over Fulton, but injuries have riddled both teams. Both teams do have key playmakers that can make things happen, still available. It's going to be an interesting shootout in Fulton to see who wins the wooden shoe. Either way, one team's going to go home with it. The other team's going to come back hungry next year to be ready to fight for it again. One of the most interesting matchups in the NUIC this week is Du-Pec traveling to Seneca. Du-Pec enters this game at 7-1 while Seneca is perfect at 8-0. Both teams enter this game with high-powered offenses. Seneca is ranked 5th in the state in the current 3A AP polls, while Du-Pec enters this game ranked 13th in the exact same poll. However, when you take a look at the power ratings put out through CalPreps, MaxPreps, and the Massey ratings, the roles are reversed when you take a look at that, as Du-Pec is rated 5th and Seneca is rated 9th. What's that mean? Who knows? We could be in for a very big ball game, which many are expecting to happen. Seneca, being ranked in the Class 3A polls, will most likely not finish there, as well as they will but they appear to be headed to the 2A playoffs. This will be a very big game for Du-Pec, as a win here will not just solidify them 8 wins on the season, but it will also most likely get them into one of the top 3 seeds of the state playoffs in Class 3A to help provide them with a path for another potential deep playoff run to match the run that they had last year. Time will tell, but we'll see how it all plays out. Speaking of Du-Pec, Cooper Hoffman surpassed William Gustafson last week for most total offensive yards in his career. So with that, Cooper Hoffman is now your all-time NUIC leader in most total offensive yards. Congratulations, Cooper, on that honor. He's also, interestingly enough, 2 touchdowns away from surpassing William Gustafson to hold the most combined total offensive touchdowns in NUIC history, which Will Gus currently holds at 87. Cooper sitting at 86. And then on top of that, the more interesting note, he's less than 300 yards away from surpassing his own brother on the NUIC all-time passing list. We'll see if that all holds true, but big week ahead for the Rivermen as they head to Seneca on Friday night.
Our 8-man game of the week is brought to you by Best Realty. Best Realty has been helping Northern Illinois tackle their real estate needs since 1990. Whether you're buying or selling, in the market for residential, commercial, or acreage, they'll help you get the best deal. Call the Best Realty team at 815-248-3408 or visit them online at bestrealtyproperties.com.
The oldest rivalry in the NUIC. The two teams with the most wins in NUIC history. A combined 10 state championship game appearances. That's right. We're talking about our Best Realty game of the week between Galena and Stockton, as Galena and Stockton both enter this game at 5-3, with this game taking place in Stockton at John O'Boyle Field. 2015 was the last time we saw Galena and Stockton in the same playoff field, where they actually met up in round one, with Stockton winning that game 34-2. Last season, Galena picked up the win to keep the Blackhawks out of the playoffs. Now, it's time to renew that rivalry. This time, both will be in the playoff field, and this game has bigger aspirations on it, as the winner of this game will come away with the higher seed in those playoffs. John O'Boyle Field's going to be rocking for a rivalry game, as both teams battle in a playoff game type atmosphere right along Highway 20. It's going to be a great Friday night. Both teams are geared up, ready to go. Both teams have dynamic offenses with big play capabilities out of their running backs, the ability to throw the ball, the ability to score quickly. It's going to be a nice, hard-hitting, perfect fall type of game when these two teams collide on Friday night. You're not going to want to miss it. Right now, we do have Stockton picked to win. Would not be surprised if it gets reversed the other way. When it comes to this game, throw the records out the window. It does not matter. Last year, Stockton was the favorite going into this game, headed for what looked to be a playoff spot, and Galena upset that bid. Now, this year, both teams already pretty much booked into the playoffs. It just comes down to playoff seeding and a little bit of that old rivalry feel of, hey, we got you this year. We'll see how it all plays out come Friday night, but this is a game that you're not going to want to miss. All right, that gives you a look at what we have coming up in Week 9. We'll take a look at our playoff outlook from Class 3A down to 1A and into IHSA real quick. Okay, taking a look at the playoffs. Some of the questions I continue to see are related to how teams are seeded for the playoffs. And what I keep seeing is people are taking a look at state rankings and trying to correlate that into how the IHSA seeds teams for the playoffs. State rankings have no bearing with the IHSA. The state rankings are done by media members, not by the IHSA. So with that said, they have to use an unbiased formula that they've been using for decades now to put teams into the playoff process. So the first step of selecting the 256 teams that make the IHSA field for the playoffs is as follows. First, all conference champions that have 6 or more teams in the conference automatically receive a playoff berth. So regardless of your record, if you are in a 6-team conference and you win your conference championship, you have an automatic berth into the playoffs. After that, all the other teams that can make the playoffs will come down to total wins, playoff points, which is your combined wins of all of your opponents. And I think that's where most people are getting confused. They don't understand what playoff points are. Playoff points, simply put, are your opponents of the team that you're following, your opponent's team's wins, summed up in one. So the combined total of wins of all of your opponents. The next tiebreaker would be the combined wins of your defeated opponents. So the teams that you beat in the regular season, their wins added up would become the next tiebreaker. If you have total wins and it's a tie, which that's likely going to be the case, the first tiebreaker is your playoff points, which is your combined opponent's wins. If you're still tied after that, then it goes to your defeated opponent's wins. If there's still a tie after that, then if there's head-to-head competition involved, the head-to-head competition will take the next tiebreaker. And if that still does not break the tie, then it's going to go to random selection. So, that is how the 256 team field is set. Once that field is set, then they take the teams that make the field, 256, and they divide it out by 8 classes, which means they have to find 32 teams to fit into the 8 classes. You can do that one of 2 ways. You can start with the highest enrollment and grab the 32 highest enrolled schools, and that becomes Class 8A. The next 32 highest enrolled schools becomes Class 7A, and that pattern continues all the way down to Class 1A. Or you can start from the bottom and grab the 32 smallest schools by enrollment and put them in the Class 1A field. The next 32 smallest schools become your 2A classification, and then it continues to tier up to Class 8A. Does not matter. I've heard, well, you got to start at the top down. You don't have to start at the top down. It does not matter, because you're going to get the same results whether you start at the very top or you start at the very bottom, because you already have that 256 team field established. You just have to sort it out by smallest enrollment up or largest enrollment down. So that gives you a quick look on how that happens. Now, the other question I see is, well, so-and-so team's enrollment is 330. Why are they in the 1A field? Back in 2019, IHSA established a 2-year enrollment cycle, which means that your IHSA enrollment for athletics is determined off the 2-year average from the 2 prior school years before the current 2-year enrollment cycle. So right now, we are in the enrollment cycle of 2022-23 and 2023-24. With that said, the average enrollments for this year's playoff field were the same enrollments that were utilized last season, because we're in the second year of that 2-year enrollment cycle, which means that the average enrollments that are being used are the averages of what your school enrollment was for the 2020 and 2021 school years, along with the 21-22 school year. So those 2 enrollments added together, divided by 2, is how your 2-year enrollment cycle is looked at. So that gives you a look at that. Now, looking at 8-man football, on the 8-man side of it, they do their playoffs a little bit differently. Their playoffs are determined by wins first. So you got your wins. Then it's going to be the first tiebreaker is going to be head-to-head competition. So wins and then head-to-head competition. The next tiebreaker is winning percentage. So you got wins, head-to-head competition, then winning percentage. Because some team might have the same wins, but they may not have played all 9 games, so the winning percentage would be different. So they want to seed based off of, they want to preference wins in the IHSA field. If you're still tied after wins, you had no head-to-head competition, you have the same winning percentage, then they use the IHSA playoff points as the next tiebreaker. So then if you're tied in wins, you don't have a head-to-head competition, you have the same winning percentage, you have the same playoff points, the last tiebreaker is a coin flip. So that's how the IHSA field is set as well. So I'm hoping that helps give you a little bit more clarity on that. I know it's not always easy to follow along because you see teams sliding up and down the pole, and you got teams that are going to be in 1A get bumped up to 2A, teams that were in 2A get bumped up to 3A, and then they come sliding back down. That's all based on the fact that your field is fluid. It's not set until the week 9 games are completed. So that bar is going to continue to fluctuate as teams that were expected to win lose, or teams that were expected to lose win, and that's what creates the chaos in trying to determine what the playoffs will look like. You have to remember, there's a lot of different projection models out there. I do it my way, other people do it their way. I could not tell you how people determine what teams are going to win. I can only tell you how I determine in my projection model how I feel teams are going to win. And what I take a look at I take a look at where you're rated in the Freeman ratings. Because if you have a rating of 33.3 and a team you're playing has a rating of 1.3, that means that those two teams are separated by 32 points. So the team with the higher rating, in theory, should win that game by about a 32-point margin. Then I take it into a projection calculator. For that, I use 2 different projection models. I use CalPreps and I use Massey ratings. Both of them have been able to formulate different probabilities, win percentages. They project out scores based off of the rating system. So there's no bias in the system. A rating has no bias. It doesn't know who player A is, who player B is, has no clue who the players are. All it's doing is taking raw data and analyzing that data. So it's taking Team A and it's taking Team B. And it's looking at how many games did Team A win? How many games did Team B win? What was the average score differential for Team A compared to Team B? Did Team A and Team B meet up in the regular season? If they did, that's going to show as well. Then it's going to take a look at any common opponents Team A and Team B have. If Team A played another team that Team B played, even though they didn't play each other, that kind of opens up the door to compare what those two teams could potentially do if they were to meet up. Then it takes a look at Team A's schedule and Team B's schedule. How has Team A performed against their schedule? How has Team B performed against their schedule? Then it takes a look at their opponents. How have their opponents compared against their schedules? And how have Team B's opponents compared against their schedules? Then if there's any cross games in there, it's going to take a look, okay, Team A beat Team C, Team B beat Team D, Team C beat Team D, and it's going to start cross-referencing that information as well. Then it's going to take a look at your strength of schedule and do a comparison that way also. So there's many different things that build this algorithm. None of it has anything to do with the human element. It's just taking inputs and spitting out outputs. So it's not always accurate, but you can pretty much get right around an 80 to 85% accuracy out of it. That's what we call the Freeman ratings. Cal Freeman's the one who created the Freeman ratings. He used it as a way to predict games and outcomes to help him win in tournaments that they put together on bracket contests and things like that, like the NCAA brackets. He created a formula that was able to be replicated over time and then continued to build on that to see what he could do, and through that was able to start to build up the algorithms. Now, the best way that it works is the more history it gets put into it, the more accuracy comes with it. So at the beginning of the year, you can have a team, and I'm just going to use Johnston City as an example, who in the Class 2A field showed that they were the number 3 rated team at the beginning of the year. Now we fast forward to going into week 9, and they are sitting at a 7-1 record, but they're no longer in the top 10 ratings. Part of that reason is because through the first 3 weeks of the regular season, your ratings are going to be somewhat predetermined based off of how you finished last year. Now, technically, every team starts every year at 0, but it puts teams at a mark to start the year based off of their average finish over the past couple years. That way, there's at least a starting point to have a rating system in place through the first 3 weeks. Once you get past the first 3 weeks, it throws all that historical information out and is simply calculating based off of the performance of this season alone. And then it continues to build from there. That's how I go through and I do my projections. So, it's an easy way. Is it wrong at times? Yeah, it can be wrong. It's been wrong quite a few times, and I can't really remember which forum it was, whether it was on Facebook or on X. Somebody out there had asked what my projections have been for the year. So I could not find the message to get back to the person. So I'm just putting it out here, and hopefully that person knows that I'm talking about them and answering their question right here on this video. But my record so far in calculating NUIC games along with NUIC affiliated teams that are in 8-man football, I am 90-9 on the season. And I'm not talking about the projection models I put out there. Those projections are not my personal projections. Those projections are fed from the Cal Preps and Massey ratings that I already talked about. My win percentage is based off of the teams I actually picked to win each game. So far on the year, I'm 90-9, which is basically a 91% win percentage, which is really it's higher than where I'm normally at this time of the year. I think this year has been a relatively easy year to pick games, especially after the first 5 weeks. A lot of my losses came within those first 4 weeks. I feel that sometimes it's definitely harder to pick games early in the season, but once you hit that midway point, it becomes pretty easy when you start to see teams play each other, how they match up with each other. You're still going to be wrong, but your chances and likelihood of being wrong become a lot less if those are the things you're paying attention to. In order to do that, though, you have to look at a game. You have to remove your heart from the game. Like, you have to have a whole different level of respect for the game. You can't be tied to a team because you have to remove the emotional aspect from it, which to me is really a lot of fun. As a coach and being part of a team, yes, I want to win every game. I care to win every game. I'm going to go into every game thinking and knowing that I can beat any game or beat any team, and I'm going to prepare myself that I can beat any team. On the backside of it, though, when you have to get away from all those aspects and facets, you can really sit back and see the game for what it is. Naturally see the team that's doing better. Naturally look at what team is outperforming the other team in what areas and what facets that they're outperforming them in. To me, that's a lot more fun. It definitely is a lot more fun. But that's how I go through and take a look at these rankings. Anyway, I wanted to clear some of that up. I don't want to spend a lot of time on it. I want to go through this relatively quickly. But I wanted to get that out there because I see a lot of messages coming through on many different platforms. And I just wanted to make people aware of how I go about doing my process. Now, taking a look at all things, we'll start in 8-man. Right now, there are 15 teams that are truly solidified into the playoffs. Well, I shouldn't say that. Technically, there's 14 teams that are solidified into the playoffs, but 15 spots are actually secured. It's going to come down to 3 teams. Metro East Lutheran's 1 team. They already have 5 wins, but out of the 5 wins, they have the fewest amount of playoff points. Alden Hebron sits at 4 wins. They have a game that is favorable to them to win this week to garner that 5th win. They have the most playoff points of the 3 teams that could fill the final 2 spots. Orangeville sits at 4 wins. They are in the middle of the 2 teams with playoff points, but they have the hardest competition left remaining as they have to play the number 1 ranked team in state, which are the Polo Marcos. So, with all that said, every team that is currently sitting on 5 wins or more, with the exception of Metro East Lutheran, has already qualified for the IHSA playoffs. If Orangeville can beat Polo on Saturday, they will knock Metro East Lutheran out of the playoffs. If Orangeville can beat Polo on Saturday and Alden Hebron loses on Friday, Orangeville will knock Alden Hebron out of the playoffs, and Metro East Lutheran will retain that spot. If Alden Hebron and Orangeville both lose, Metro East Lutheran is automatically in with their 5 wins. Alden Hebron would be into the playoff field because they hold the tiebreaker over Orangeville because both teams would be in tie for wins and they played each other in the regular season, of which Orangeville lost that game to Alden Hebron. So Alden Hebron holds the tiebreaker over Orangeville considering both were to end at 4 wins. Now, Alden Hebron is projected to win their game to get the 5th win. So, in theory, we do have an idea, very high idea, of who the 16 teams are that will make the playoffs. We definitely have it narrowed down to 17. It comes down to one game, Orangeville and Polo. With that said, the only way that this field's going to get shook up as far as the 16 teams that are in the field is if Orangeville can beat Polo. Now, other things can happen within that. We have West Carroll playing South Beloit, of which West Carroll is currently favored in that game. West Carroll is projected to be in the 7th seed. If South Beloit beats West Carroll, which can very much happen, it is a toss-up game. On paper, these two teams look very closely rated together. They do have a lot of similar scores against common opponents. South Beloit would get that 7th seed, while West Carroll would then fall to the 11th seed. So there could be some shakeup there. West Central has a game this week against another playoff opponent. That could potentially shake some things up. Don't know how much that will actually happen. Big West Central started off 6-0. And since I've been doing the playoff projections, I've had them projected to finish 6-3. They play Ridgewood this week. They have, in reality, they have low chances of beating Ridgewood when you take a look at the projection models. So with that said, it's going to be a tremendous upset if the Heat can beat the Spartans. But if they do, that's going to definitely make a shift into the playoff seedings as well. Some other games that could potentially change some things up would be South Fork and St. Anne. Those two teams are also playing against each other. South Fork is 5-3. St. Anne is 6-2. St. Anne is the favorite to win that game. If South Fork does win that game, both teams would finish 6-3. That's going to pull South Fork ahead of St. Anne in the seedings because they would be in a tie for wins. But because of head-to-head competition, South Fork would get the higher seed. Those pretty much are the only games. So one last game would be Pawnee against Milford-Cisna Park. Pawnee is undefeated. Milford-Cisna Park sits at 6-2. So MCP cannot bypass Pawnee as far as seeding, but right now Pawnee is projected to be the number 1 overall seed with a win. A loss would move Polo into the number 1 seed with a win. MCP would finish 7-2. They would also move up in the seedings. Lot to break down in there. There are a couple things that could play out to make that happen. But like I said, the projection model is what it is. Come Saturday night on our playoff show, we'll go through and we'll take a look at how we forecast the outlook to, or the bracket to look, and then we'll release the bracket once they come out. So it'll be fun to take a look at that. Now, looking at the teams in the cut line. So that's the next thing I'm getting questions on are, well, how many 4 and 5 teams are going to get in? So in theory, right now, there are technically, looking at IHSA, there are 148 teams that are clinched into a playoff spot. The Chicago Public League, in their 4 white divisions, there's 6 total white divisions. 4 of them are only contracted to have 6 teams make the playoffs. 4 conference champions, 2 second-place finishers. The 4 second-place finishers of each division are playing each other this week. The winner of those games are the teams that get the nod to make the playoffs. So technically, that's 150 spots available or booked in the 256-team field. Now, across the 5-win teams, there are some 5-win teams in the Chicago Public League that will not qualify for the playoffs, even if they get a 6th win in Week 9, because they are either A, part of, well, it would only be because they're part of a division or said conference that will not allow them to qualify based off of their standing in the regular season. There's also 4 divisions in the Chicago Public League where their teams aren't even showing up on the Outlook either because they cannot be eligible for the state IHSA playoffs. But the 4 divisions in hand, the 6 white divisions and the 1 red division can all make the playoffs. 4 of the white divisions have restrictions around them. I shouldn't say manipulations. It's not manipulated. They have restrictions around them to where they're 4 conference champions and they're 2 of the runner-ups are going to make that playoff field. So there are some 5-win teams in the Outlook that cannot make the playoffs because they did not make the qualification standards that the CPL put out to IHSA to allow them to qualify for those playoffs. With that, there are 72 teams currently going into Week 9 that have 5 wins. That gives you a total of 226 teams. 222 teams that can make the playoffs. Now, there is one team out there, Amundsen, and I got to take a look at this because I'm not quite sure I fully understand it because I haven't looked into it very much. But there it is. Chicago Amundsen can make the playoffs. They are a 4-4 team. They have 40 playoff points currently. And they play Chicago Lane this week. With a win, they're going to be in the playoffs, which would pull them into one of 7 teams coming out of the CPL Red Division. So, there's a lot to look at right there alone. But, needless to say, 222 teams, technically, and I say technically because I'm adding the 5-win teams to this, have spots filled. There are 58 teams currently sitting at 4-4 heading into Week 9. There are no 4-4 teams that are matched up with another 4-4 team going into Week 9. There are 34 spots to fill. 34 spots to fill. There are 30 teams at 4-4 that are projected to win their Week 9 games. So, if that holds true, that means that there are going to be 4 teams with at-large bids at 4 and 5. So 30 out of 58 teams that are 4 and 4 are projected to win Week 9. Now, if that number goes less, if less than 30 teams that are 4 and 4 win in Week 9, then our amount of 4 and 5 teams is going to go up. If we get more than 30 teams that are 4 and 4 to win in Week 9, the amount of 4 and 5 teams we're going to see in the playoff field are going to go down. Which then, in theory, can start to begin to shift those playoff lines. However, the playoff lines that are going to be most affected are not going to be in our area of coverage. There is nobody in Class 1A through 4A that is going to make the playoff field at 4 wins unless somehow only 20 teams or less win in those 4 and 4 matchups in Week 9. That's how far we'd have to go to get a team into the Class 3A field, which would be, looks like it would be Herscher, but they're a ways out. They are a ways out. They're one of the 4 and 4 teams this week that has to win to secure a spot in the playoff field, and they're not projected to win. But that's how far we'd have to go. Right now, the biggest teams, the biggest classes that are most affected would be Class 4A all the way up to Class 8A. Lot to talk about, lot to see. A lot to see. It's crazy. Very crazy. But that's the name of the game. That's what makes it fun. So, taking a look at Class 1A. Right now, I currently have Class 1A projected at 296.5. Taking a look at Susie's projections, he also has that same classification. Now, how we broke it down is different. We definitely have a different breakdown because, like I said, we probably use different projection models to predict our games. Therefore, the teams I have winning are probably going to be a little bit different from the teams he has winning. In either case, right now, 296.5, the highest enrolled team in Class 1A is the Oakwood Comets, who were one of the teams that got an upset win in Week 8 to help push the model to where we see it currently going into Week 9. That means that the 1A field is pretty much already set because it's not going to squeeze much lower than that. Realistically, it can only go one school lower, and that's if Clifton Central can win on Friday against Salt Fork. They would then secure their 5th win of the regular season. They would push Oakwood into the Class 2A field, removing one of the 4 and 5 teams that could be eligible to make the playoffs. And then Clifton Central would be the largest team in Class 1A at 292.5. So with that said, the lowest enrolled team projected into the 2A playoffs is Deer Creek Mackinac at 299. Last year, they were in the Class 1A field, with that enrollment being the largest enrollment out there. This year, they're on the bubble again, but instead of being the biggest school in Class 1A, they're looking at being the smallest school in Class 2A. Fair enough. They are a 4 and 4 team that has to win in Week 9 in order to make the playoffs. If they don't win, they're not going to get in. They don't have enough playoff points to make it without a win. So they have to win this week in order to get in. And if they do, they will be the smallest team in Class 2A. They are favored to win their game. Another team that changed things on the outlook was Decatur St. Teresa. The Bulldogs picked up a win last week over Mater Dei, which then propelled them to a 5th win. They have to play Highland this week, who is favored to beat them. Therefore, St. Teresa is looking at finishing at 5-4. But with their 5th win, they would already be pretty much locked into the playoff field, as we're looking at 4-win teams as at-large bids. And they're pretty safe on playoff points, as they will most likely leave with either 39 or 40 playoff points, which would be more than enough for a 5-4 team to be in the playoffs in this season. The highest enrolled school right now in Class 2A is Nashville at 406.5. There's not a whole lot that will change that outlook unless Deer Creek Mackinac loses. If Deer Creek Mackinac loses and other teams below them win as expected, that looks to be the only path right now for Wilmington to drop back into the Class 2A field. That was one of the big questions. What's it going to take for Wilmington to make the Class 1A field, or the Class 2A field? Deer Creek Mackinac would have to lose. Clifton Central would have to lose. Everybody else in 1A is already there at 5 wins or more. So there you go. That's the look. That's the story. That's where it's at. So, with that being said, Wilmington then is the smallest school in Class 3A at a 409 enrollment. And currently looking at things, Chicago Phoenix would be the largest team in Class 3A at 559. Now, the interesting thing about Chicago Phoenix is that they are in one of those Chicago Public League divisions where the second place team has to win to get in. They are one of those teams. They have to play Chicago Clemente this week. If they win, if Phoenix wins over Clemente, they are in. They are the favorite in the matchup. If they lose, that will pull a team from Class 3A, provided all things hold true in Class 1A and 2A, with Clifton Central losing, DMAC winning. Then that would pull a team out of 3A down into, or out of 4A down into 3A, which would be Chicago South Shore, who's also part of the CPL divisions that would need to win to get in, but they won their conference title, so they're already in the playoffs. Chicago South Shore would move into the 3A field if Phoenix loses to Clemente on Friday. That would make the top of the 3A field, as it sits, either 559 with Phoenix in or 561.5 with South Shore in. So really there's not a whole lot of games that are really going to shake up the apple cart, so to speak, as far as the teams that are in the playoff field for Class 1A to 3A. There's a few, not many. Most of the games that are really going to affect what's happening in the playoff field are going to come from Class 4A and up. Very, very stable going into Week 9 in Class 1A to 3A based off the playoff projections. The only thing that's going to potentially change is if we have two teams destined for the playoffs, such as a game that we were talking about earlier tonight with Stockton and Galena or Du-Pec and Seneca, the projected model of those teams winning, which right now Du-Pec's favored and Stockton's favored, if that reverses and Galena wins and Seneca wins, now you're talking about seed changes. But as far as the teams in the field, we're pretty confident on the projection models we put out there that the 32 teams you saw in our Class 1A, 2A, and 3A state projections will be the teams you see in the field. And we're probably about 85 to 90% sure on the seedings. So there's still a little bit of change that can happen, but there's not a whole lot there. So Class 1A to 3A going into Week 9, we always talk about that Week 9 chaos. There's really not a whole lot of chaos going on in Week 9 for Class 1A to 3A. So pretty stable look going into Week 9. Going to be very comfortable looking ahead into the playoff show and how the playoff brackets will turn about. So that gives you a look at what the playoff brackets are looking like, a deeper dive into the playoffs, how the fields are set and determined. It also gives you a look at the inside of where I calculated up teams that are currently in, teams that are projected to be in at 5 wins, how many open spots are available out of the 58 teams that are 4-4 this week, along with the 2 other secured spots for the CPL. Hopefully that gives you all the information you need going into Week 9. And then on top of that, don't forget to tune back into our NUIC football playoff show on Saturday night. We kick off at 6:30 p.m. I'll be joined by View from the West, Greg Armstrong, a spotlight on IHSA's Joe Meridian, former Orangeville head coach Jay Doyle, as we break down not just teams in our area, we're going to break down teams in the entire state from IHSA, Class 1A, 2A, and 3A to bring you the best playoff show with the most information that you're going to get out of any of the playoff shows across the state. So tune in, YouTube, NUIC football, 6:30 p.m. on Saturday night, October 26th. It's going to be fun. It'll be live interaction. You'll have the ability to ask questions in the chat box. We'll live interact with you when that time comes after the bracket release, and then we'll continue to go through different dialogues and allow people to ask further questions. I guarantee you, every question asked will receive an answer. So, look forward to it. Thank you guys for following along all season. Last week of Friday Night Lights, get out to those games. As always, root for the NUIC.